Op tells tales of her entitled brother, starting with him taking her out for Christmas dim sum and then sheepishly forcing her husband to cover the bill. Posted by u/pls_pass_the_sarcasm. This one might be a long one, apologies in advance. Okay, maybe it was my bad for not checking to see if my brother, Kevin, had the means to pay for himself and his family for dinner, but lesson learned. This is one of many attempts my brother has made to swindle me and or my husband out of money, but for some reason, this one sticks out the most, probably because my poor husband got caught in the middle of it. I call this the Great Dim Sum Incident of 2013. It was Christmas Eve, and Kevin called me and asked if my husband and I wanted to go out for dim sum on Christmas Day with him, his wife Karen, their 2 kids, nephew 1 and nephew 2, and Karen's mom. Considering Karen is of European stock and her family celebrates Christmas Eve, they had Christmas Day open. My own in-laws were out of town, so we said sure, we'd join them. Kevin's and my parents were long gone. Now, anyone who is familiar with dim sum knows that it's a madhouse on a good day, and it's amplified tenfold on Christmas Day. No matter, we donned our football gear and got our table for 7. We were seated after about 20 minutes, because, madhouse, and while we were waiting for the carts to roll by, my husband and I gave nephew 1, nephew 2, and Karen's mom their Christmas gifts. Kevin, Karen, husband, and I don't exchange gifts. All good. Everyone had their fill, and despite the pandemonium inside the restaurant, we all had a good time. Then it was time to settle the bill. For 7 people, the bill came to about $80 and change before tax and tip, pretty reasonable. I was doing some quick math in my head and figured my husband and I were going Dutch with Kevin and his family, meaning we'd pay approximately $30 plus our share of tax and tip for our portion, while Kevin would cover his family. It was still stupidly busy inside, so my husband said he and Kevin would settle the bill while I took nephew 1 and nephew 2 outside to play until they were done. Karen and her mom stayed behind as well. 10 minutes go by and my husband, who is easily one of the most patient people I know, exited the restaurant with the darkest expression on his face. He walked over to me and gently, but firmly, took my arm and hissed, "We're leaving," and led me toward the car. Confused, I gave the boys their goodbye hugs and waved to the other adults, though it didn't strike me until later that Kevin and Karen wouldn't look me in the eye. After getting in the car, I looked at hubby and said, "Okay, what was that all about?" He took a deep breath and explained. When he and Kevin got to the counter to pay, the hostess asked if it would be together or separate. My husband said separate, but then Kevin took out his wallet and said he had no money, and his credit cards were maxed. My husband was about to rail into him, but Karen and her mom then chimed in and accused him of wanting to deliberately spoil Christmas for their 2 kids and how selfish it would be not to cover the bill because 1, it would embarrass them, and 2, it was Christmas and you guys have more money than us and can afford it. Not wanting to make a scene in a crowded venue, my husband ended up paying the whole thing, albeit grudgingly. To his credit, Kevin offered $5 because it was all he had, but my husband told him to keep it because it was obvious he needed it more. Kevin and Karen have tried inviting us out a few times since, but burned once, twice shy kind of thing. Not the first time they've tried to use their kids to get money out of us, but that's another post for another day. Top/relevant comments. Commenter. I know you didn't create these children, but I appreciate anything you can do to teach them what they won't learn at home about how to be stable, happy, self-sufficient adults without criminal records. They'll be part of the adults running the world when I'm old and helpless. The adults, on the other hand, can live with their own choices, unless you think they truly want to do better. Op's response. Thankfully, their kids aren't stupid. My husband and I try to instill good values, especially when it comes to their education and finances. Sadly, their immediate role models aren't exactly viable. My brother isn't all bad, but an extremely privileged and pampered upbringing skewed his views on budgeting. We're from a culture where sons are viewed as gods while daughters are seen as commodities and/or burdens, so money burns a hole in his pocket. There are tons of examples of this throughout our childhood and early adulthood, but again, that's another story for another day. Each incident warrants its own post, and trust me, I have many. Commenter 2. Are you Chinese? The whole viewing of sons as blessings and girls as burdens is something I've seen in some of my Chinese friends' families. It's very sad. Op's response. I'm Asian, but that's about as far as I'll go. Update 1 day later. After posting my cautionary tale of the Great Dim Sum Incident of 2013, it made me think back to years prior, when I was a lot more naive and far less cynical than I am now. This is pretty much the incident that started it all. If you found the last post amusing, you might find this entertaining. In all honesty, I'm not sure this even belongs here or in a different subreddit that focuses mainly on crappy relatives. Guidance/suggestions would be greatly appreciated. Pretty much the same players as before, just limited to 3 this time, Kevin, Karen, and yours truly. It was 2004, and Kevin calls me, and he seems to be in a state. Kevin, sis, I need some help. Me, yo, what's up? Kevin, well, money's really tight, it always is and always will be, and after paying rent I have, like, zero cash for groceries. The boys won't have anything for school lunches or even decent dinners, etc. Can you help me out? Now, I am fiercely protective of my nephews, and he knows I'd do anything for them. But for himself and his wife, not so much. And he knows that too. Me, I'll see what I can do. How much do you think you'll need? Kevin, would you be able to swing $300? I can pay you back when payday comes, in 2 weeks. Considering $300 for a family of 5 would barely cover essentials, I thought this was reasonable. Me, okay, I think I can swing it. I can pick you up and we'll hit up the grocery. Kevin, I don't have time tonight, was planning to go tomorrow morning. Would you be able to drop off a check or cash? He had no working vehicle, and I lived a good 30-minute drive away. Besides, I had to work in the morning and knew he worked the afternoon shift. Me, all right, give me an hour. I drove the 30 minutes, dropped off the check to a seemingly very grateful Kevin. Everything seemed fine. As it was about 10 p.m. by the time I got home, I crashed. At work the next day, I decided to call Kevin and remind him to deposit the check right away. Karen answered the phone, and I was shocked as hell during the following conversation. Me, hey Karen, is Kevin home? Karen, no, he's out of town. Me, oh, did work send him off for something? Karen, no, he's on that road trip, remember? Me, huh, what road trip? Karen, he's gone to Chicago for that board game tournament. Are you backing out now? You told him you'd give him money for that. He and 3 buddies decided to carpool, and apparently, he needed the $300 for his share of gas, food, and other traveling expenses. Me, no, I told him I'd give him money for groceries for your kids. You're telling me he's gone cross-country for a goddamn gaming tournament? Karen, calm down, it's not like you're hurting for money. You can afford it. Granted, my husband and I make decent money, enough to be comfortable, but we work damn hard for it and not once did we ever flaunt our perceived wealth in their faces. And I assure you, I never offered to pay for a road trip. Me, if he can afford to go to a effing game tournament, he can damn well afford groceries. Karen, you'd let your nephew starve? I hung up. I was so furious. But not as furious as I was several weeks later, when I got another call from Kevin, with the same sob story. No money, kids are hungry, can just barely make rent, blah blah blah, can you spare another $300 until I get my work bonus? Me, sure, Kevin. When were you planning to go get groceries? Kevin, I was going to go tomorrow morning before going to work. Me, what a coincidence, I have tomorrow off. I'll swing by at around 9 o'clock. Kevin, no, it's okay, it would be easier for you to just drop off cash or a check. Me, so you can go on another effing road trip? I don't think so. He says nothing and is dead silent. Me, see you at 9 o'clock. He tried to protest, and I laid it out for him. You get sweet nothing unless I pick you up, take you to the store, and buy you groceries. And groceries are all you're gonna get. If your kids are starving, you'll find far more value in that and take me up on my offer. It's what you needed, after all, by your own admission. Picked him up and took him to the store, where he proceeded to get maybe $20 worth of food. Dropped him off at home, where he left my vehicle without a word. Not even a thank you. But my satisfaction in confirming my suspicions was its own reward. For the record, I called my nephews that evening to make sure they had eaten, who excitedly told me they had takeout pizza for dinner. Bless their hearts, they really had no idea what kind of manipulator their dad could be. At least they're now at that age where they can see and understand that what their parents are doing is wrong. I just hope they continue to be the good boys that they are. Top/relevant comments. Additional info from Op. After that incident, I never gave him a red cent, at least in cash form. If he said he needed anything in particular, be it groceries, sundry items, or school supplies for the kids, I offered to take him and buy those items. Except for the initial $20 for groceries, he's never taken me up on those offers. It was my way of telling if he truly needed anything or was just trying to basically steal from me under false pretenses. The gravy train came to a screeching halt. Did Kevin ever pay out back the $300, and why is he such a mess? Hell no. That will never happen. Not sure where his money goes. As far as I know, he's not a drug user and doesn't gamble. As for kids, I'm sure he was in an idealistic state of mind at the time and didn't bother to think about future plans. For a university-educated guy, he sure is stupid despite graduating with honors. But, as they say, being book smart doesn't make you street smart. Or life smart. Second update 2 days later. Pretty long one. Not the first story I've written about my entitled brother Kevin, his wife Karen, and their kids nephew 1 and nephew 2. I'm kind of torn about enjoying the schadenfreude that ensued, since it resulted in some pretty bad karma for Kevin, but given the history of Kevin's actions, some of you may find it justified. It's a multi-parter, and I'll try to keep it organized. The reason I posted to this sub is, even though Kevin is a piece of crap, almost every single bad decision he's made is usually based on him using his kids to gain sympathy or money. If this belongs somewhere else, let me know. Quick backstory: Kevin and I were raised in a semi-traditional household where boys are revered and girls are frowned upon and considered irrelevant, burdens, and overall disappointments. This resulted in a spoiled, coddled Kevin, and to quote a phrase from Willy Wonka, a kid can't spoil himself, you know. Kevin grew up with a parent-paid post-secondary education, along with residence, tuition, books, and meals all paid for since our parents didn't want him to distract himself with a job while pursuing his BA. Throughout the post-secondary years, it became evident that Kevin was using our parents more like a bank than anything. No calls or visits unless he needed money. At first, our parents obliged, but they slowly started to realize the entitled monster they'd raised, so they began cutting him off. He then hooked up with Karen, who was 5 months pregnant at the time with someone else's child, this is important, and threatened to quit school so he could help her raise the child. Because our dad was paying for his schooling, he basically told Kevin over my dead body, and that if he wanted to quit, then he'd be on the hook for all of the tuition up to that point. Kevin got pissed, moved out, and got a job doing low-end retail. He finished his BA and gave up an amazing job in his field of study to support Karen and nephew 1. Nephew 2 didn't come along until perhaps 3 years later. Part 1, Dad. Our dad fell very ill with stomach cancer, and the prognosis was not good. At the time of diagnosis, he was given approximately 3 months. During those 3 months, Kevin would still only come by the house when he needed money, and only stuck around long enough to either receive a check or be told no. It was more often the latter. He never even asked how Dad was doing. After Dad passed away almost exactly 3 months later, the first thing Kevin asked our mother was if Dad had a life insurance policy. Kevin's presence was not welcome after that, and even though he attended the funeral service, he left quickly after making his obligatory appearance. Part 2, Mom. Approximately 2 weeks after Dad's funeral, I came home from work one day to find Mom sitting with Dad's good friend George, who was also a life insurance broker. Curious, I asked her what the purpose of George's visit was, especially so recently after Dad passed away. She explained to me that she applied for a policy for herself, for $500,000. I was floored. Mom, I don't mean to sound pessimistic, but there is no way you'll qualify for such a policy. Your health isn't terrific, you're diabetic, have heart disease, and high blood pressure. She just smiled at me and said, "Don't worry. Just make sure your brother knows, but not until the time is right." Okay, Mom, sounded kinda cryptic, but whatever. Same crap all over again. Kevin didn't come visit Mom after Dad passed away, unless he needed money. And over again, nothing was shelled out to him. I don't know what hurt her more, the fact that her husband of 40+ years was gone, or that her only son was treating her like crap. Kevin would try to bully her, saying that she didn't care about her only grandchild and that she was depriving him of a decent childhood, etc. And Karen would try to chime in at the same time. It was horrible. 4 weeks after this encounter, Mom passed away from a heart attack and stroke. I could barely think, I was in so much grief and shock at the thought of losing both parents within 6 weeks. After signing the appropriate paperwork at the hospital, Kevin said he would drive me home. I had in my possession our mom's personal effects, clothes, jewelry, purse, etc. On the way home, he asked the most unbelievable question. "Kevin, hey, did Mom have any money in her purse? Kid needs food." I almost threw myself out of the car doing 50 miles per hour. Without a word, I looked in her purse, fished out a $20 bill, and flung it at him. Then the next thing out of his mouth. "Kevin, did Mom have a life insurance policy?" Bingo, that's what she was getting at back then. I guess the time is right. Right now, I thought. Yeah, she applied for a policy shortly after Dad died. I guess she wanted to make sure we were taken care of in case something happened. Kevin, really, how much? $500,000. The ride was silent for most of the way back. I swear I heard cha-ching coming from his direction. Part 3, the aftermath. Approximately a month after Mom's service, and yeah, it was a replay of Dad's, where Kevin would simply show up and leave after making his obligatory appearance, again leaving his kid's sister with the responsibility of the funeral and other crap, I received a letter addressed to my mom. I opened it, and sure enough, it was from the insurance company. The very first paragraph started off with, paraphrased, "We regret to inform you that you do not qualify for the aforementioned life insurance policy," etc. After talking to our trustee and executor, I was told either he or I could call to inform Kevin. I volunteered to do it. So I called up Kevin with the unfortunate news. Me, "Hey, Kevin, got a letter from Not a Real Company Life about mom's policy." Kevin, "Oh yeah, when do we get the check?" Me, "That's just it. She didn't qualify. It was a regrets letter." We argued back and forth, and I finally said, "Get it through your thick head, Kevin, she didn't qualify for the policy." All hell broke loose. "Kevin, what about my kid? I can't afford to pay rent. He needs food, we need rent, we need to pay off our vacation. How could she do this to me?" Karen then grabs the phone. "You did this, didn't you? You're just jealous that you don't have kids. I was 22 at the time, engaged, working, and going to school, and had zero interest in having children, and you just want all the money for yourself. Nephew 1 needs this money for his education, and you're going to effing steal it from him? You would steal from your own nephew? You piece of crap. I'm going to sue. That money is ours, you don't deserve a effing cent." What followed was a rather indignant and panicked call by Kevin to our trustee and executor, who happened to be my mom's cousin. I later found out the life insurance guy was in on the prank, remember, old friend of Dad's, simply to teach Kevin and his wife a lesson they'd never forget. Apparently, Kevin racked up close to $40,000 in debt upon being told that Mom applied for this policy, spending money he didn't have but was expecting to get. Turns out Mom and Dad, even though they showed zero faith in me while growing up, apparently had a different view as I got older and figured out I'd be okay if anything happened to them. They were right, especially since I moved back home to look after them after they both fell ill. Meanwhile, the pride they had in Kevin had waned to the point where cutting him off financially didn't do any good, so Mom felt she had to play the ultimate revenge from the grave. Yeah, it screwed him up even more as an adult, and in a way, Mom ended up punishing a monster she and Dad themselves created, so I do feel a little bad for him. But because he keeps finding new ways to try to cheat me and steal money from me, I feel bad only a little. Just a little. There was an inheritance later on, and believe me, the story gets even better, but another story for another day. If you guys are interested in hearing more hijinks, I'm happy to share. /relevant comments. Commenter. This story made me tear up. She was planning her death all along and used it to punish Kevin. She told you to tell him only when the time was right, and you did. Your mom is a reincarnation of a god, I just know it. Ops response. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry once I finally realized what she had been planning all along. And knowing she went through all that emotional pain while withholding her real reason was, I think, a way to protect me. I know she and Dad felt guilty for the way I was treated. Dad later apologized to me when he was in the hospital, but overall, I think it did me way more good than bad, even though I was a resentful kid and didn't realize it at the time. Kevin still has that silver spoon, but I feel Mom took that silver spoon and shoved it up his rear with her act of revenge. Third update 6 hours later. Firstly, I'd like to thank you all for the great feedback on my other sordid tales from my past. These posts aren't a means to gloat, but they're a form of therapy that is a lot more affordable than seeing a shrink. My work benefit package kinda sucks that way. It's pretty clear I have some unresolved issues. Those of you who have read my last post will be interested to know this incident follows shortly afterward, probably about a year and a half later. I should also note, I'm a fairly new Redditor, and these stories are not always in chronological order unless stated otherwise. So, after the dust settled a bit, the god-awful task of settling the estate was next. Dad was a very hard-working man, and despite his faults, hey, we all have them, and if you believe otherwise, you're a goddamn liar, he managed to provide for a family of 6 with a roof over our heads, good food on the table, and the creature comforts that we all sometimes take for granted. When he and Mom passed, they left us 2 kids, Kevin and myself, with a considerable sum, with the intention of giving us a comfortable head start in life. It wasn't a staggering amount by today's standards, but definitely enough for a starter home for each of us. This was well before the housing crisis came to be. I was newly married and felt the best way to handle this newfound inheritance was to invest in a modest home, free and clear, pay off all commercial debt. Thankfully, my husband and I are good that way and didn't have much consumer debt, and buy a vehicle to replace my little jalopy. There was even enough to put a down payment on the vehicle for my husband. Despite my parents being gone, I was in a good place, all things considered. I didn't care if I didn't have 2 nickels to rub together. We were both working full-time and had a house fully paid for. Kevin received the same amount. He, too, decided to invest in a new home and a new used vehicle. Very smart use of his portion. Or so I thought. About 6 months later, I received a disturbing phone call from Kevin, saying he was broke and needed money. I was incredulous. He was also looking for a new place to live. What happened to his house? Then the bomb was dropped. He admitted he had given up his house to foreclosure. Instead of buying his place outright, he placed a 10% down payment and decided to mortgage the rest. This tactic only works if you don't mind losing a crap ton of money to interest and if you intend to, make your mortgage payments. He had neither. After being notified by the bank about his sad state of affairs, he was given an incredible gift. Because Kevin was a new homeowner, the bank was willing to make a one-time concession, pay 2 months of outstanding mortgage payments up front, and the rest would be tacked onto the amortization period. Seriously, that crap never happens. It was a gift from some unseen entity that took pity on this piece of crap. And you know what he said? Nah, take the house. Take the house. So he was able to sell the house for a $3,000 profit, and then decided to rent some crappy apartment, where he remains to this day. I don't know where his money went, and it's really none of my business, but I'd be lying if I said I wasn't curious. So you're probably asking where the entitlement comes in? Kevin, I'm short on rent. Me, oh, this again? Kevin, this is serious. We're going to be evicted if I can't come up with rent by the end of the week. Karen, aka sister-in-law, screeching in the background, she owes us money. So, I should backtrack a bit. When the estate was settled, I petitioned for a small portion of Kevin's share, about $10,000, to cover the following items, among other things. Cleaning out the family home, including performing repairs to prepare the house for sale. Arranging for both funeral services since Kevin went AWOL. My paying for both grave markers out of pocket since Kevin refused to pitch in for what Dad's policy couldn't cover. My paying for legal fees in relation to the execution of both wills and settling the estate. I should note that Kevin, in a moment of clarity, agreed to this arrangement without hesitation, even though I made it very clear that he was under no obligation. I thought that would be the end of it. Karen wouldn't have it. She accused me of stealing from Kevin his rightful share and that I had such nerve to be so selfish as to demand money from them when it was totally undeserved. This coming from the same woman who paraded through my parents' home on the day of Mom's funeral, pointing out crap she wanted. I jokingly bet my husband that Kevin would go through his inheritance within a year, while my husband said 6 months. I still owe him a fancy steak dinner since I lost the bet. Anyway, back to the rent story. All I could do was tell Kevin that I simply couldn't afford to pay his rent since I had tuition to pay for, and that my husband can't stand him, but I didn't tell him that. He didn't end up getting evicted, so he either found another sucker or had the money squirreled away, was just trying to find a way to get more money out of me. Karen will make a sniping comment now and then about how well off we are at their expense. She still claims that their financial downfall is somehow my fault as opposed to their atrocious money handling skills. The most important thing is they never did get kicked out, but I'm still dumbfounded and appalled at how this whole crapstorm played out. I honestly wish I could say that these stories are fabricated, but sadly, they are not. And even more sadly, there's more in that tiny library I call a brain. May post more later. Thanks for reading. /relevant comments. Commenter. May I ask, what the hell happened to your brother that made him this way? Op's response. Spoiled from birth. Firstborn child, and being a son at that. In my parents' eyes, he could do no wrong until they finally realized what kind of unappreciative douchebag he turned out to be. Gender inequality runs rampant in my culture, and it's sad to say that my story isn't unique. I was fortunate in that my parents recognized this when I reached my early 20s and actually apologized shortly before they died. Most females in my situation aren't afforded that kind of recognition. Fourth update 1 day later. Lately, I've been having a ball in r/entitled parents with stories involving my entitled brother Kevin, but since this story doesn't involve his children, I'm leaving it here. I can't say with 100% certainty that Kevin has narcissistic personality disorder, but I often wonder, considering his actions in the past. This one still stings me to this day, and it happened when I was in high school a long time ago. When I was 18, I was involved in a serious car accident that resulted in a broken leg and required a cast from below the knee to the ankle. I was okay to get to school, but I went to school out of the catchment area and commuted by public bus. There was one main bus stop located at a train station, this is important, where I'd transfer buses coming home from school. I had gotten out of class early one day, which was both good and bad. Good because, well, out early. Bad because the one bus that went past my house was an express bus that ran only during rush hour, and it wouldn't start running until about 2.5 hours after I got to the train station. I didn't want to take a different bus that went nowhere near home, considering my condition, and it wouldn't have made much difference anyway, since my dad was working in the truck and my brother was out with the family car at the time. As I was sitting down on a bench, I actually saw my brother disembarking the train with his then girlfriend, now wife, Karen. I was elated. This would mean I wouldn't have to try to wait out another 2 to 3 hours for my bus or be stranded at some establishment waiting for a ride home. Me, frantically waving, "Hey, Kevin. Kevin, oh hey, what's up?" Meanwhile, Karen is giving me a dirty look. Me, "Hey, do you have Dad's car here? Are you going anywhere near home? Can I get a lift? The 473 bus doesn't come for another 2.5 hours. I say this as I'm looking down at my cast and crutches. Kevin, well, I can't, really. We're going shopping. Karen starts whining, saying, "Come on, we have to go." Me, "Where are you going shopping?" Kevin, "Oakville Plaza." Me, "Kevin, you literally have to drive right past the house to get to Oakville. Can you please drop me off? I won't be able to get home for ages. Kevin, I have to go to work after, and I have to run Karen back to her place before going to work. Me, "But you have to drive right past the house to drop her off too. Please, I would be fine with this if I didn't have this damn cast and crutches. I can't walk home like this." Kevin, after thinking for a second, "No, you can find your own way home." And then he left. I started crying in anger and frustration. How the hell was I supposed to get home? A middle-aged couple approached me and told me they saw the whole thing and gently offered me a ride home. Through tears and sniffles, I politely declined. This was in the late 80s, I was terrible around strangers and didn't want to take a chance, and thanked them for their generosity. Still freaking out, I rummaged in my pockets and found a quarter, and I called the only person at the time who I felt could help me. I called Mom. As I explained the story to my mom, I could sense her anger even though she didn't say a word throughout my explanation. Then, in a tone I had never heard before, she said, "Don't worry, we'll deal with your brother when you get home. Take whatever bus that will take you to Dalton Square. Go to the coffee shop there. I'll call them and make sure you can hang out there till we can get you home." Mom didn't drive much, just to local places, and Dad took the pickup truck to work and he wasn't home. I hobbled to the waiting 469 bus and traveled to the Dalton Street Cafe. My mom called the shop, gave them my name and a description of me, and made arrangements with the shop owner to let me charge anything I wanted to her credit card while I waited. It beat having to wait outside in the cold. I sat there for a good 2 hours, sipping coffee and eating a sandwich, wondering what was going to come of the day. Then I saw Dad's car roll up, brother behind the wheel, with my mother in the front seat with him. Well damn, I thought, this is gonna be fun. So it turns out Kevin ran Karen home, then stopped off at home to get changed for work. Ironically, he worked at the mall he went shopping at earlier in the day. And when he got home, my mother showed a rare side of herself and absolutely lost it on him. She made him run down to the cafe, pick me up, and drop us off at the house before going to work. When I limped my way into the car, he snarled at me, "Because of you I'm going to be late for work." Mom then smacked him upside the head and told him to shut his mouth. He dropped us off and sped away, squealing the tires as he left. I hobbled my way upstairs to the living room and fell asleep on the sofa. I was dead asleep until my dad came home. He worked afternoons and got home around midnight, and then I heard a whole load of yelling. I mean, yelling and shouting at the top of the lungs type of thing. Clearly, Dad wasn't too happy about what had happened earlier, and he wasn't letting my brother forget about it. A week later, my brother moved out. Those of you who have followed my stories and are /entitled parents know of my parents' relationship with my brother and how spoiled he was growing up. I think this was the pivot point where things started to change and they realized what kind of a monster he had become. There will be more to come, just don't know when. Fifth update 6 hours later. So you thought I'd run out of stories about my entitled brother Kevin and sister-in-law Karen? Oh, how wrong you were. This one also involves Karen's mother, and let me tell you, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. This happened just before my first nephew was born. The nephew is not Kevin's, not that this matters, but it does lend a bit of relevance since Karen essentially roped Kevin into being a baby daddy when she was 17 and desperate to find someone to support her. I was sent an invitation to Karen's baby shower, organized by herself. Maybe I'm a bit old-fashioned, but I was brought up with the notion that it was in poor taste for the expectant parents to throw their own showers, but perhaps times have changed since then. Anyway, I read on the invitation that it was a Winnie the Pooh theme. I was a student working part-time at minimum wage, and Winnie the Pooh, or anything Disney-themed at the time, was way out of my price range. I definitely didn't want to go empty-handed, so I checked my bank account and went shopping. The only thing I could find in my price range was a Tiny Toons-themed onesie and a couple of receiving blankets. I figured they would be of the mindset that it was the thought that counts, and they were super strapped for cash, so some useful items, despite the lack of the desired theme, would be appreciated. Hell no, I couldn't have been more wrong. When the time came to open gifts, I excitedly gave her mine and waited with bated breath. The look of disappointment and then disgust took the wind out of my sails. Karen, the theme was Winnie the Pooh, not Tiny Toons. It was right on the invitation. Karen's mom then snatched the onesie and scoffed, "This isn't even worth $10. She even went so far as to toss the receiving blankets into the pile of wrapping paper and muttered, "How could someone be so cheap?" I was floored and hurt. I could barely stammer out, "I'm sorry, but I couldn't afford," and she cut me off. Her mom, "If you couldn't afford a decent gift, why did you even bother coming?" Side note, Karen and I are very close in age, so I was 17 and very timid at this time. Glad to see I've changed since then, in spades. I looked around the room and it was as if everyone was frozen in place, teacups hovering and sandwiches in mid-bite. I was so humiliated and thought everyone was in shock at the crappy gift I had given that it never occurred to me that they were actually shocked at Karen and her mom's appalling behavior. Even Kevin looked uncomfortable. I burst into tears, gathered my stuff, and promptly left for home. There was nothing else I could do. I had spent my last $20 on the gifts, wrapping paper, and card, and I didn't even have money to go to a restaurant to get myself a cup of coffee and wallow, so I went straight home. Mom and Dad weren't home, they were on a well-deserved vacation, so I just curled up with a book and tried to distract myself from the events of that afternoon. In the end, Kevin did feel a little bad, even though he didn't stand up for me. He called me and told me the shower pretty much ended right after I left. He did express a smidge of an apology for Karen and her mom's behavior, which was quickly quashed when he added that the shower ended early due to my outburst. Gee, thanks. I go out of my way to find a thoughtful and affordable gift and have it thrown in my face, along with insults, and somehow it's my fault everyone decided to leave early? Screw you and the camel. I told my folks what had happened after they got back from vacation. At least Mom expressed her relief at being out of town for the event because she had zero interest in going. /relevant comments. Commenter. I'm so sorry for what you went through. I'm also sorry for your nephews, who have to grow up around rotten people. I hope they turn out all right and nothing like your brother, sister-in-law, or mother-in-law. Ops response. This happened over 25 years ago, and from what I see, those boys are turning out just fine. I don't know how, but I'm not going to question it. Meanwhile, Kevin and Karen keep finding themselves in sticky financial situations due to poor decision-making. My husband and I refuse to help them out after being burned too many times, so Kevin and Karen know better than to approach us. Nephew 1 and Nephew 2, however, know they can come to us if they need anything, and they show no signs of the rude, entitled attitude, thank God. 6th update 1 day later. I think Reddit may have created a monster in me. Ever since I found this sub, I've been dying to relay stories of my entitled brother Kevin, his wife Karen, Karen's mother, and their kids Nephew 1 and Nephew 2. The more I think back, the more crap I seem to dig out from my subconscious, as I've been making a concerted effort over the years to repress a lot of it. Every time I finish a story, my dear husband says, "Oh, but what about X? Don't you remember when he did Y?" So it's a never-ending cycle of story after story. But with the glory of the internet, I now have an outlet to vent, and I thank you all for allowing me to do so. I love this sub. The only drawback is the floodgates have now opened, and sometimes I think I'm posting a bit much all at once and fear I'm spamming. So if you think too much is too much, let me know and I'll put the muzzle on. It was right before Nephew 1's 6th birthday, and Kevin and Karen wanted to throw him a birthday party. Nephew 1 voiced that he really wanted to go bowling, complete with hot dogs, cake, ice cream, presents, and all of his little friends in attendance so they could have a fun afternoon. This sounded wholesome and fun. I remember my past birthday parties involving bowling and having a blast, so I happily obliged when Kevin called to ask for a bit of help from me and my husband. The only concern was that I was working that Saturday, but I had arranged with a coworker to switch shifts so I could attend. Thankfully, the coworker is a father himself and understood the need for me to take this particular Saturday off. I knew Kevin and Karen were struggling financially, and naturally, they still wanted to show their little one a good time with all of his friends. To help ease the burden, my husband, who also arranged for a day off from work, and I offered to bring a cake and supply the grab bags, mini bags usually full of dime store candy and small toys that are distributed upon the kids' departure from the party. There were 10 kids confirmed, which meant that the bags alone and their contents would be between $50 and $70 in total if you included the cost of the bags and the cake ingredients. Since store-bought cakes are often expensive, and taste like crap, especially if purchased from a grocery store chain, I opted to bake a chocolate scratch cake, per nephew one's wishes. My husband and I weren't rich by any means, this was several years before the inheritance came to be, and we were both still early in our careers, with one of us taking PT classes at the same time, but we felt we could definitely set aside a maximum of $100 toward this little shindig. Karen jumped at the offer and gave us the details. The night before the party, I made the scratch cake and decorated it with sprinkles and colorful icing, complete with Happy Birthday Nephew 1 scrawled on top in bright blue decorating gel. It wasn't a Rembrandt or Picasso, but it looked pretty festive and nice and was tasty as hell, and most kids aren't terribly concerned with how fancy a cake looks, they just want to eat it and get that sugar rush. Meanwhile, my husband was filling the treat bags, 10 bags containing a small assortment of candy, a toy whistle, and a clacker toy. We even made 2 extra ones in case there was a surprise kid or two, or if one of the kids had a little sibling at home and they didn't want them to feel left out. All in all, we were set. The next afternoon, my husband and I carefully loaded the cake and grab bags into the car and made our way to the bowling alley close to Kevin and Karen's place, so roughly a 30-minute drive away. Kevin and Karen were already there, as well as Karen's mother. This alley hosts birthday parties regularly, and they have a room set up in the back for such an occasion. We carefully carried the cake and bags to the room, ensured the girl behind the counter started the hot dogs, they were cooked on rotating spokes in a glass display and took quite some time to heat up to a proper temp, and waited for the kids to arrive. Within about half an hour of arriving, 10 kids showed up, along with some parents, making it 12 kids if you included Nephew 1 and his brother Nephew 2, and about 6 adults. Great turnout. We herded the kids to the shoe counter, where they all got their bowling shoes. After helping them lace up, we hit the lanes. All of the adults opted to sit back and watch, and 2 of the kids didn't bowl. One had a cast on his wrist, and the other simply didn't want to bowl. I think he was just in it for the cake, lol, but they were amazingly well behaved and were content just sitting on the bench, watching their friends chuck balls down the lanes. After about an hour, we called the kids to the back room for hot dogs, cake, and presents. Thankfully, this went off without a hitch. After everyone had their fill, bowling resumed. Once the third game was done about another hour later, it was time for the kids to leave. My husband handed each kid their grab bag, which was welcomed with a huge thank you, Mr., and everyone was happy. Or so I thought. My husband and I started gathering up the paper plates while Kevin returned the bowling shoes to the counter. Then came the time to pay. Thankfully, Nephew 1 and his brother were sitting at one of the tables playing with toys, away from the adults so they couldn't hear the ensuing conversation. "All right," said the fellow behind the counter. "That's a bowling package for 12 kids at $6 each. I'll only charge you $3 for the 2 kids who didn't bowl to cover their hot dog and pop, so that comes to $66, please." No one moved. I looked at my husband looked at Kevin looked at Karen, and Karen and her mother were both shooting daggers at me and my husband. Karen's mom, "Well?" Husband, "Well what?" Karen's mom, "Aren't you going to pay the man?" Me, "For what?" We already made the cake and the grab bags. You were expecting us to foot the bill again for something? Karen's mom, "Well, isn't that what you promised to do? You said you were going to pay." Me, "I said we would cover the cake and the gift bags for the kids." Karen's mom, "Well, the cake," boys dripping with contempt, "was homemade. You cheaped out on the cake, so you may as well put the extra toward the bowling. Why are you trying to cheap out on this whole thing and go back on a promise and break a little boy's heart?" Husband, "Like hell we will. We did our part, you can take some responsibility for once," while pointing at the 3 of them. Karen, Nephew 1, calling out to the birthday boy, "Come here please." Nephew 1 trots over and says, "Yeah?" Karen, "Auntie and Uncle don't want to pay for your birthday party." Nephew 1, while hugging my husband's legs, "But Auntie and Uncle brought cake and presents. I thought you and Dad and Grandma were taking us out." It took every ounce of willpower not to burst out laughing. Kevin's face turned beet red with embarrassment, and Karen was visibly flustered. Me, "Did you have a good time, Nephew 1? Nephew 1, "Yes. I had so much fun bowling and playing with friends and eating cake, etc." Me, laughing and giving him a big hug, Okay, listen, kiddo, we have to go, but you give us a call later tonight, happy birthday." Nephew 1, "Okay, thank you for the cake." And with that, my husband and I turned on our heel and walked out, leaving the remaining adults to hash it out. Nephew 1 called me later that evening and we briefly chatted, but he was winding down from his sugar rush so the call was short. I never did end up finding out how Kevin, Karen, and Karen's mother handled everything afterward, but that was one of the few times I left him hanging and felt really good about it. /relevant comments. Commenter. What a beach, trying to guilt the birthday boy into tears to make you pay. Ops response. Par for the course. This is nothing new, coming from these hags. I'm just glad nephew one saw what was what. The last thing we needed or wanted was the poor kid seeing a bunch of grown-ups squabbling over something meant for him. He's a sweet kid, and even at that young age, he would have felt some guilt and thought that he was to blame. Karen and her mother have no scruples at all. Responding to someone telling her Kevin is an abuser, she is the victim, and this is not her issue to fix. And that's what took me so long to realize. Very rarely was I able to leave him hanging, for example, birthday party, but I allowed him to use the fact that we have no immediate family left to guilt me into caving, especially with me being the baby sister. There's a 4-year age gap between us. Family honor ranks very high in many cultures, mine being one of them, and he took clear advantage of that. I had to finally make an unpopular decision, but at least it frees me from any more emotional burden. My extended family knew not to meddle, and like with my entitled brother, they had to let me find out for myself. It's been a very expensive life lesson, but I came out better for it. With others, he used the longevity of supposed friendship as a crutch. Because they weren't tied by blood, it was much easier for them to walk away. Thank you so much for your kind words and advice. You have no idea how much better I feel. Truly appreciated. 7th update 2 days later. My husband reminded me of an entitled brother incident I had repressed, February 17, 2019. This one kinda skates a fine line between belonging here and just no family. If it doesn't belong here, I'll remove and post elsewhere. In one of my earlier, many, posts, I mentioned my entitled brother Kevin and sister-in-law Karen behaving badly at my mom's funeral tea. I recalled her walking around the house openly pointing out crap she wanted, but my dear husband, fiancé at the time of the incident, and I were reminiscing about this day last night after I told him about my posting these stories to Reddit and how helpful it, and all of you guys, have been. Husband, Karen was just walking around pointing out what she wanted? Me, yeah. I remember her walking around upstairs in the living room, commenting about how much she liked the painting over the mantel. And how they could use one of the sofas. And how nephew one would like the Nintendo system, which was actually mine. Husband, no, I meant, is that all you remember? Me, it was a pretty emotional day and it's been well over 20 years. Husband, you don't remember what happened downstairs? Me, I remember sitting with all my cousins downstairs while the aunts and uncles were upstairs having tea. But that's about all I can really recall. Husband, honey, I was downstairs with you and the cousins too, but you seriously don't remember Karen casually commenting to Kevin about how the house was all theirs now, and they were both standing within 2 feet of me? I just stared at him blankly. Husband, it was pretty obvious the cousins heard because all of a sudden you had cousin 1 pinning your elbows behind your back and cousin 2 freaking out and begging you to calm down. You don't remember? Me, I remember being upset and the cousins trying to calm me down, but I really don't recall why. Husband, Karen and Kevin made a hasty retreat out of the room, and I followed them to make sure they left right away. I knew you'd be fine with all 7 of your cousins. I was scared what would have happened if Kevin and Karen decided to return to the rec room. Me, so that's why they left? People were asking where Kevin went and I had no answer for them. Husband, yeah, that's why he stayed for only half an hour. I didn't want to say anything to the aunts and uncles because you had been through enough that day. Besides, I'm pretty sure your cousins would have informed them later. I couldn't believe she had the audacity to say something so inappropriate at a funeral tea in front of so many people that were related to you and your mom, and in front of you, no less. It was, and still is, none of her business. No wonder your family hates her so much. Maybe I should be glad I didn't remember everything from that day. Geez, I had the chain of events of that day all wrong before. /relevant comments. Commenter. Please tell me the entitled pricks didn't get their way. Ops response. Hell no. I was still living in that house, as I had moved back home to be a live-in caretaker for my folks after they fell ill. We also had an extremely competent trustee/executor, who was mom's cousin and also a lawyer, who made damn sure Kevin and Karen didn't get away with any crap. Those two were expecting to kick me out and move in because they felt they deserved it, due to having a kid and needing a break from paying rent. Commenter 2. Are Kevin and Karen still together? Are they still a part of your life? After reading all of your posts, I don't know if I could have been as strong as you. Your posts make me want to slap the entitlement out of people I've never even met. I don't know how you do/did it. Ops response. Kevin and Karen are still together, yeah. Codependency is a terrible thing. And when it comes to his mother-in-law, he turns into a sniveling yes-man to whatever whim she and her daughter have. He's henpecked by 2 greedy, strong-willed women, and I think he's realized he's in a place where he doesn't want to be anymore, yet can't leave as he has no spine. It's clear he's a broken man, but I'm definitely not going to be the one to fix him. 8th update 1 day later. I know almost all of my stories took place years and years ago, so I don't know if such submissions would be considered relevant, as they're not in the present day. Please delete/remove if this is not appropriate here. My entitled brother Kevin is usually the focal point of my rants, sometimes involving his wife Karen. My brother was spoiled as hell, and while my parents meant well at the time, they didn't realize just how badly things would turn out for both Kevin and themselves. Kevin was set to graduate from a fairly prestigious university, on Dad's dime, and even though Kevin had proven himself to our parents to be utterly greedy, shameless, manipulative, and selfish, they still indulged him. So yeah, I do acknowledge they played a huge part in his attitude, but their punishment was having to put up with his abuse. He was living on campus during the school year and split his time between the family home and wives, then girlfriends. During the semesters he didn't have classes, usually limited to one per year, winter or spring, depending on his course load. And during those semesters off, he would work at a local retail shop for additional spending money, even though he wasn't expected to contribute any of it to living expenses or tuition, Lord knows why. Upon graduating from uni with his BA, my parents were super proud, as they should be, as he was the first one to graduate from post-secondary. It was a reason to celebrate, and the parents had a myriad of graduation gifts for him, a new watch, a gold chain, cash, etc. Despite the magnitude of gifts he received, he approached Dad with a request for a car, citing the need to have a vehicle since there was now a baby, nephew one, to look after. Dad was skeptical. He was nearing retirement, and he had already used up both Kevin's and my RESP's, registered educational savings plans, to pay for Kevin's last year of uni. His heartstrings were being manipulated with the mere mention of nephew one, but he also knew that he couldn't plunder his and Mom's savings just because Kevin wanted a car. So after hemming and hawing, he made Kevin a deal. He would co-sign a loan for said car, so long as it was limited to something sensible and affordable. Together, they settled on a newer model second-hand Geo Metro, think of a gas-powered sewing machine, the epitome of a compact car, for $3,000. The minimum payments came to a reasonable amount. If I recall correctly, Kevin would have had to make a $50 payment twice monthly. The problem with this setup is that Dad would be taking all the risk while Kevin would get off scot-free if he defaulted. Dad made it very clear to Kevin that he would have to be extremely diligent with making that minimum payment, or else it would be Dad's credit that would suffer. Kevin eagerly agreed, stating that he was going to get more hours at his retail job to maintain the payments. You know where this is going, don't you? 2 months go by without incident, until one day I got a phone call from my dad. It was the bank. Dad wasn't home, so I asked if I could be of any help. They couldn't tell me anything really, except when I asked if it had anything to do with a loan. Side note, Mom and Dad dealt with one bank forever, Bank 1, and this loan was made through the bank Kevin dealt with, Bank 2. So when the bank rep said he was calling from Bank 2, it was pretty easy to discern the reason they were calling. The rep kind of faltered. We lived in a very small town, where everyone knew everyone and their business. I got a sick feeling in my stomach and told them I'd get Dad to call them back or visit their branch at the next possible moment. When Dad got home, I had no choice but to tell him. When he returned from the bank, he was madder than a wet hen. Apparently, Kevin hadn't made a single car payment, not one. The total amount outstanding wasn't huge, but the fact that he had welched on an agreement between him and Dad and put Dad's credit at risk made him furious. Dad called Kevin with a fury I had never seen before. Kevin promised he would make the payments ASAP, and we thought that was the end of it. Another 3 months go by, and Dad got yet another call, for the same reason. Dad again called Kevin and demanded he bring the car to the house since he couldn't be responsible enough. The plan at that point was to allow me to take over the payments and have full use of it. Here's the problem none of us were expecting. Kevin told Dad he didn't have the car anymore. When asked, more like demanded, why, he said it needed a $400 brake job and he couldn't afford it, so he sold it to some guy down the road from him for scrap, for $100. Because it was a private cash sale, there was no search for liens or anything, and he just let it go. Words cannot express how pissed off Dad was. He demanded Kevin continue with the payments, but Kevin refused because he felt he shouldn't have to pay for a vehicle he didn't own. And because Dad was on the hook as the co-signer, he was ultimately responsible for that loan. Dad ended up paying for that car for the next year, and it was another nail in the coffin for Kevin. I think that was when Kevin was completely cut off financially, but it came too late. Outlined in another post, the last straw came when he abandoned me at a train station when I was on crutches, and he refused to give me a ride home when he was in possession of our dad's car, opting instead to go shopping with Karen to a mall that took him literally past our house. After both parents had their way with him, he moved out permanently a week later. It's been over 20 years since that happened, and I'm still mad about it. Disclaimer: this marks the end or close to the end of my entitled Brother series, unless I'm able to go deeper into my subconscious. I hope you've enjoyed reading. And if even one person dealing with a crappy relative benefited from these, then that's all that matters. Top/relevant comments. Commenter: with all the stupid decisions your brother has made, I'm surprised he hasn't gotten himself into debt with the mafia or loan sharks or something. Ops response: to be fair, we don't know that. Honestly, it wouldn't surprise me if he eventually did borrow from the wrong people. He borrowed from other people countless times when we were younger. Hell, one of these people was actually calling my place directly, asking where he was. And this was several years after the parents were gone. The little jerk was using my phone number as an alternate contact number with payday loan companies, and because he changed numbers so frequently and moved several times, he was hard to track, even for us. Commenter: of course, trying to avoid responsibilities by dumping them on you again. You might have to change phone numbers and not give him your new one. Ops response: oh, this was years ago, and he was using the landline number. My husband and I have since moved a couple of times, and I don't think Kevin has this number. We still have a landline. Kevin has my cell phone number, the same number for the past 20 years, and not once have I received a call on this number asking for him. Kevin will contact me on Facebook Messenger before anything else, and that's just to provide me with updates on the kids. Like I said, no attempts at getting money since 2013, and I hope it stays that way. I'd like to think he knows that well has long run dry, and he knows better than to try and pull that crap on me ever again.